So let's flip back to our Common Core state standards now. In 3rd through 5th grade, again, we have that standard to use common grade appropriate affixes as clues to a meaning of a word. And so we might have a goal like during a shared reading, Leo will determine the meaning of a new word formed with a known word and a prefix. So remember that we saw in the research information that we need to be explicit when we are trying to teach morphology skills. So here is a book called If You Were a Prefix, and it's written by Marcy Aboff and illustrated by Sarah Gray. And this book is a meta-linguistic book. So it really teaches about what prefixes are and how we use them. So it'll start out with the line, if you were a prefix, you would come first. You would be a letter or a group of letters placed before a word to change its meaning. Transformed, multicolored. So we see that it's telling you exactly what prefixes are and how to use them. And then the illustrations show what happens when we change words with prefixes throughout the book. This is part of a word fun series of books. They also have a suffix book in addition to the other different language targets that I have listed there. But you might want to start with a book that is very explicit about how we use those affixes. So here we have a Common Core state standard related to vocabulary. In the 3rd grade, students are supposed to be able to acquire and use grade appropriate words and phrases, including those that communicate spatial and temporal relationships. So we might have a goal that when retelling stories, Anna will describe the locations of objects and spatial relationships with grade level vocabulary. And this is one of my all-time favorite books. This is Stick, written by Steve Breen, and it is a wordless, or really a near wordless book. There are a few words in there, but the story is definitely not communicated through the printed word alone. And wordless and near wordless books really provide excellent stimuli for talking about temporal and spatial relationships because there's such a big focus on the illustrations. The illustrations are typically richer and they tell the story of how objects and events are related to each other. So in this story, Stick is an adventurous little frog who would give any mother gray hair. Of course, his mother doesn't have hair. He's a fun little guy, and what kid can't identify with kind of pushing his mom's buttons, which is what Stick does at the beginning of the story. In this story, Stick is trying to catch bugs, and as you can see from the cover, he catches a dragonfly. And the dragonfly drags him through the city out into the country, and Stick eventually ends up lost and very sad until a stork-like bird ends up bringing him back home. And I did include another picture from the book here, and you can see that in this case, Stick has detached himself from the dragonfly, but has gotten stuck now on some balloons, and he's being chased by a dog and some boys and a chef. And you'll have to take a look at the book yourself to find out how he got into that part and why a chef would want a frog and all that fun stuff. But one thing that I wanted to show you is a use of just these post-it flags. So I have the word rear and the word trailing written on some of them, and then I've also identified some of the nouns in the story that might be related to those spatial relationships like sidewalk and balcony. And you can see here that I have a list of spatial relationship vocabulary words that are appropriate for 3rd and 4th grade that can be discussed in the story. And one thing that, again, I want to bring up is that we don't need to just have words that are written in the story for us to address them. We can use the illustrations and our knowledge of what words are appropriate and what the different words are trying to communicate to select words that help us to talk about what's going on in the books that we choose. Okay, so let's talk next about lexile levels. Lexile levels are a measure of text complexity based on the semantic and syntactic features of a text. So the text is analyzed, and then based on the vocabulary that's used and sentence length, the company comes up with this Lexile level. There's a really good chance that somewhere in your students' records you can find their Lexile level from the last time standardized assessments were administered. So assessments like Ames Web, the Scholastic Reading Inventory, Dibble's Next, and others will generate Lexile levels for students. So that kind of gives you an idea of that student's reading level. Now, if you're reading to them, they might be understanding texts that are more complex, but it kind of gives you a range to shoot for. One of my favorite resources is News ELA, and this is a website, but they also have it available in an app version. And there are current news articles from a variety of mainstream sources, the AP, Washington Post, National Geographic, the Smithsonian, the History Channel, PBS, and others. And what they've done then is adapted the reading level to 5 different Lexile levels. So anywhere from 2nd, 3rd grade at the lowest level up until 12th grade. 5 different levels for each article, and you just click the Lexile level button to make the vocabulary and sentence length or sentence complexity in the article easier or more difficult. So the content remains the same, but then you change the reading level. And with those articles, they have writing prompts and quiz questions. So just a great resource to, provide students with some text that is more appropriate to their age level and their reading level, and then also allows them to have a good handle on kind of the issues of the day that maybe other people, adults and peers, might be talking about.